everyone, and welcome back to another Who Stuff podcast. So, following on from our underrated stories video, we will be discussing today about stories that we find overrated. I think I speak for all of us when we say we might have found compiling it down to 3 a bit difficult. So, I'd say for one, my first overrated story, I'd say Silence in the Library and First of the Dead. I have never seen the appeal of this story whatsoever. The last time I watched this was last year, and Silence of the Library, it's just 40 minutes of standing and talking, and then the last 5 minutes is just running about. Like, it's just a story of standing and talking. It's nothing amazing. It's just a bit bland and boring. Then the next part, it's got more in it, but people only really like it because of Donna and the river's death. That's all that happens. And it's a shame because I do think the Vashti and Narada are an interesting concept, but I just feel this episode is just so stupidly boring, and I just don't understand how anyone can sit and watch it and not get bored at all. Second, I would say Dalek. I used to love this story, but again, when I watched it last year, I just found it a bit boring. It seemed like the Dalek was only killing people just for the sake of the kill count. The Ninth Doctor is good with his grief of the Time War, but everything else, just like Van Statten and just all the other characters, and just Rose as well, it's just... I just don't really like it, to be honest. My last one, Eristica era episode, Series 11, quite surprising, Kablam. Now, again, used to love this episode, but it's just kind of average. Sure, it's a fun-ish episode, but it really isn't anything too special. The plot is decent. The overall, thing with the bubble wrap is just a bit shit. Yeah, I always see nothing but love for it.
I'm very pleased that someone's finally acknowledged that the Library two-parter is the dullest Doctor Who story on Earth. For my overrated stories, the first one I've picked is going to cause controversy, I know, but it's The Power of the Daleks. The reason I don't enjoy this one, yes, it's a missing story, maybe I'm judging it a bit unfairly because the animation isn't great, but I have to say, I just don't get an awful lot of entertainment or enjoyment out of this story. I think the performances are okay. I mean, you can only really judge by the audio here because it's animation. Even the animation isn't great, but it's one of the many 6-part classic Who stories which could have been condensed into a 4-part story, and it would have done the script a whole lot of good. And I just don't see the appeal. The first time I watched it, I actually quite enjoyed it, but rewatched it not too long ago, and I just didn't see the appeal personally. My next story is another one from Series 4, and I've picked Midnight. I think the overall opinion of this one is that people enjoy it. I really don't. I definitely feel that this is the point in the 10th Doctor's era now, towards the tail end of it, where he just doesn't feel like the 10th Doctor anymore, like he was in his first 2 series. And I think it's a bit of a crime that Donna isn't in this one, because, well, she's just sitting on a lilo for about 30 seconds of this story. I get the appeal of it, that it's something different and it's a very confined story. It's very character-led, but I think that's just what makes it a bit dull for me. And it's not one that I instantly put on. It's experimental, a little bit like Sleep No More for me. And for the two of them, they're not brilliant. And my final story is from Series 11, and I've picked, controversially, Rosa. Now, this wouldn't get nothing but love, and I can understand that because it has a fantastic message behind it, and that message is conveyed perfectly in this story. But I only feel that people give this episode the praise because of the final 5-10 minutes. but it's a 45-50 minute story, and I feel the first half of it, especially trying to include some sort of villain, just doesn't work. And I think this is the direction which New Who historical stories need to take nowadays, is to say, well, perhaps we don't need a villain, and just focused on the historical stuff. And perhaps if you're that focused on including a villain, then maybe follow up the next story in the series with a very, very scary villain. But especially when Chibnall is involved in writing it, I just feel you just need to focus on the historical aspects. It's not all about the villain. So for the message, the theme, and the historical aspect of Rosa, it's fantastic. But for everything else in the story and the sci-fi part of it, I just don't see the appeal personally, and it's not one of my go-to from Series 11, if you even have go-to from that series. So, yeah, there's my three.
Okay, so the first one I have is from Classic Who, and it's City of Death. Now, this obviously going to be quite controversial because it's regarded as a classic. However, I think I watched this one in February again, and I gave it like a 6 or something. I just don't really see the appeal. I mean, it's got cool ideas in Paris and stuff. I think it was the first abroad location, etc. But it was just a bit bland for me. I think Scarif is just a boring villain. I don't know why people like it so much. I just sort of felt myself dozing off, and I know that's very controversial, but City of Death is just not one I'm ever really drawn to. The next one is Heaven Sent from Series 9, and yes, I know, I'm so sorry. I don't know, really. I remember really liking this episode over the past few years, but I guess when the rewatch happened for the lockdown stuff, I just didn't find myself enjoying it much. I don't know what it is, because I love Capaldi. He's my second favourite Doctor, and he performs a brilliant performance. But I just feel like there's something missing, and I don't know what it is. It has a really good concept, but there's just something that I'm... and that Series 9 finale in general is just quite... It didn't have the same effect the second time, so that's that. And finally, another Whittaker story from Series 12, and it's Fugitive of the Judoon. Now, this one, I remember loving this on first watch, because I think it aired a day after my birthday, so as you can imagine, I was on quite a happy mood, I suppose. But then I rewatched this one a few weeks ago, and I think it's trying to include too much. I don't know, with the Roof Doctor, the Judoon, Captain Jack. I just feel like maybe the Captain Jack return could have maybe happened in a different episode, because of the Judoon in general. Everyone was looking forward to them, and I feel like they were overshadowed a bit, and it just really annoys me. And the Roof Doctor, I'm not really a fan of Series 12, that arc with Timeless Children anyway. It's really not grown on me very well. But people focus on it, and it's like, oh, and he didn't even play a big part, Captain Jack returning. So for me, it's just a bit of a mess, and I'm not really a fan anymore. So yeah, those are my three.
So for my three, I'm starting with Earthshock. Now, this isn't a story that I hate. I quite like it. It's not bad. I can enjoy it. It's a decent Cyberman story, but it gets like a lot of praise, and a lot of people say it's up there with the classics like Genesis and stuff like that, and some people say it's one of their favourite stories ever, and I just don't understand how, because it's good, but I don't see, like, it's nothing particularly special. And Adric's death, I also don't really get the hype of that, because it's a good, like, scene, but it would have been more impactful on a better companion, because I don't really care about Adric in the first place, so it doesn't really work. So yeah, it's not a bad story, but it's nowhere near as good as a lot of people make it out to be, in my opinion. Next, I'm going to the David Tennant era, and I'm saying Doomsday. Now, I'm not including Army of Ghosts in this, because I think part 1 of this 2-parter is very good. Army of Ghosts sets up the story very nicely. I like the Cybermen stuff. It's just a lot of fun. But then you get to part 2 with Doomsday, and it's just a mess. I hate how weak they made the Cybermen feel, because like the Dalek and Cybermen, sort of war thing is something that had been hyped up, and they did it so that the Cybermen are just so weak in comparison to the Daleks, which I don't really like.
It's really childish as well.
Yeah, it is. Rose's departure just does nothing for me, and I just don't enjoy it in any way, shape or form. Then finally we've got Jodie Whittaker story, series 12, The Haunting of Villa Diodati. Now, this is another one like Earthshock. I don't think it's bad. I don't mind this story, but when it came out, I watched it and I thought, yeah, it's alright. Then it seemed to be that so many people were just hyping about it, and I was like, I just didn't really understand it. I've heard some people say it's their favourite of Series 12, which I just don't understand. For me, it's my least favourite of Series 12. Now, Series 12 is a great series for me, so it doesn't mean it's awful, but out of all of them, it's by far the one I just don't enjoy as much, because I love the Mary Shelley theme and setting, but I just wish they'd done that for its own sort of standalone, confined story, rather than being a setup for the finale, because Ascension of the Cybermen feels like a setup enough, and the Mary Shelley stuff just goes nowhere, because it was really just an excuse to get the Lone Cybermen stuff in before the finale. That being said, I do love some of the Lone Cybermen stuff. Jodie Whittaker does an amazing performance, and that scene is brilliant, but overall it's the weakest from Series 12 in my opinion, no doubt, and I just don't really get the hype, to be honest.
I agree with that. I couldn't sit through this story when it first went out. I ended up turning it off halfway through.
That about wraps it up for this podcast. Thank you very much for watching. We hope you did enjoy, and we hope to see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.